Hello and welcome back to the Johnny Gets Cash YouTube channel. This is the latest in my series, Chop to the Top, where I'm trading my way up from a cheap car to a supercar. Now, so far in this series, you've seen me start with a very cheap Toyota Rav4 that I paid just £150 for, and over the course of 12 episodes, I have traded my way up to a working budget of over £25,000. So as always with Chop to the Top, let's start this episode by going over the figures related to the cars that were in the last episode. So as always, I'm going to use my book with all my figures in it so I don't get anything wrong and I explain exactly what's what. I mentioned at the start of the last episode I had a budget of over £25,000 to buy, restore and sell a car or cars. Now I actually had £25,525.21. So quite a healthy budget. And with that I did buy two cars. The first car I bought was a Mondeo ST TDCi. Now I paid £500 for that Mondeo. I did have to spend money on it, but here's how I spent it. I spent £200 on a stainless exhaust system. It was second hand, but it was in perfect condition, so £200 for that. I spent £20 on a window regulator. I had to have one tyre repaired at £25. I also had to have one brand new tyre at £65. I had a new wheel bearing at £81.28. New gas struts for the bonnet and the boot, that was £38. A pair of number plates cost me £15.60. A lower joint cost me £30.49. MOT test fee was £40. Bulbs were £5.20. Fuel for the car while I had it in stock was £20. Grease £7.50 and consumables were £13.99. So all of that lot totals a total spend on top of the car of £562.06, meaning that with the purchase price of £500, that Mondeo owed me £1,062.06. So while I had that Mondeo owing me that, the kitty now stood at £24,463.15, so still quite a lot of money left over. So I went out and bought a second vehicle. I bought a Range Rover Sport Autobiography, a really nice thing. Again, I had to spend money on the range, but let's go over the figures on it in total. The car, as it landed here, cost me £5,316. And the money I spent on it, I spent £125 on a new pair of side steps for it. I had to get a new number plate, just a single, £10.80. I had a full service done on the Range Rover, that was £348.20, and advertising costs on that one were £20. Altogether, that means I spent £504 on the Range Rover, and when you combine that with the £5,316 that I paid for the car in the first place, that means in total it owed me £5,820, leaving £18,643.15 in the kitty. Now remember, with that amount in the kitty, I still had the Mondeo and the Range Rover unsold. Now I'm pleased to report that the Mondeo and the Range Rover both sold, and they both sold relatively quickly and easily. The Mondeo sold for £2,200 and the Range Rover sold for £8,000, meaning that between the two cars, I had £10,200 coming back to me. Now putting that on top of the remaining kitty of £18,643.15, that meant the kitty, the rolling budget, the whole kit and caboodle then stood at £28,843.15, which is where today's episode begins. I have a budget of almost £29,000 to buy, restore and sell another car. Now I always want to work on cars that are exciting, things that you want to see, things that are a little bit different. And it's taken me a while to find a suitable candidate, but I'm very pleased to report that I have now bought a vehicle with that budget. And it's something I've wanted to get my hands on for a very long time. So without saying too much more, that car is waiting for me outside behind these doors. Let's step outside, I'll show you around the car, we'll go for a drive, and I'll explain what it is I need to do to it before I can sell that one. Let's go. Okay guys, here she is, and even on a miserable rainy day like this, I can still get excited about what you're seeing in front of you. This is a year 2000 Mercedes C43 AMG. That's right, it's a 4.3 litre V8 with over 300 horsepower. Now this is a car that I've wanted to get my hands on for a very long time. This particular car is even more special than your average C43, which, let's be honest, is a pretty special car anyway. This is a right-hand drive UK car in, as you can see, estate guise. Now, I've got a real thing for fast estates. I always have. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's from, you know, the touring car days when the old flying brick Volvos used to go around. Either way, fast estates in my book are very cool. Now, I've wanted a C43 for a very long time, and when this estate version came up, I knew it was something I had to get my hands on. I am a big fan. Let me show you around the car and explain a few bits and pieces that I know I've got to do, and give you a little bit of an idea of where I think I'm going to go with this one. This, as I said, is a year 2000 C43. Now, this particular example has done a little bit over 152,000 miles, which I don't think is too bad at all for a car of that age. It's 24 years old at the end of the day. In addition to that, let's be honest, it is a Mercedes-Benz. You know it will do the miles. If it's been looked after, these things will do those sort of miles, no problem at all. And that is my next point. This car has got a service file like I have never seen before. Honestly, the service file came in a bag when I bought the car, okay? And the bag must weigh about 5 kilos. There is hundreds, if not thousands, of bits of paper, records. I'm talking things, every bulb that's been put in the car, every wiper blade, every service, every tyre, every time this car has been touched or looked at, it has been recorded, it has been documented. Now, my plan with that paperwork is to completely catalogue it in chronological order. I've bought a load of new ring binders for it, and I'm going to make a real sort of effort to make the history, display it as well as it deserves to be displayed. Someone has spent a lot of time collating it. I want to display it properly. That will help. Provenance always helps to sell a car. Anyway, let's look at the car up close and personal. It's a very rainy, miserable day, so you can't really get a true reflection of what the paint is like on this car, but let me tell you, it is in pretty nice condition. I'm not going to say it's brand new, it's immaculate. It's a 24-year-old car with 152,000 miles at the end of the day, but this is in great condition. The only issue I have come across on the paintwork side of things is the rear corner of this bumper here. You can't tell because it's pouring with rain, but this has obviously had a rub at some point, has been blended in, not particularly well because the paint is a little bit dull, a little bit lackluster, but it's really not a problem. You can see just here actually underneath the light where the paint is starting to crack slightly and lift. It's just not great. That is my bread and butter. I can redo that and make that look almost brand new, so I'm absolutely happy with that, not a problem at all. You're probably looking at this car now thinking, well, if you know Mercedes at least, you'll be thinking, oh, I bet the arches are rusty. Now, I'll admit that is a very common thing on these cars, and it was my first thought when I looked at the car. And this particular car has got these pretty atrocious arch covers on it. I don't know why. I don't think they're standard. I really don't know what the situation is with them. I don't know if they were a factory option or anything, but you can see, if I take you up close, fortunately, there isn't really any rust to speak of. Now, I'm loath to take those things off because it'll probably chip the paint, it'll do some damage. So I'm going to leave those in place. Let sleeping dogs lie, as they say. Now, that arch there looks pretty good. If I bring you around the other side to the rear of the car, again, this one, absolutely fine. No issues at all, no rust. So that's two of the arches. I'll be honest, there is a little bit of bubbling on these arches. There is a little bit, where is it on this one? There's a little bit at the bottom here, which needs to be sorted. And that's starting to come away where there's a little bit of bubbling. And on this near side rear arch, again, it's difficult to see in this wet, but there's a little bit of bubbling just there. Not bad at all for a car this age. Normally the arches are rotted through on these things, so I'll take that as a small win. At the moment, a little bit controversial, at the moment my plan is not to do the arches because this car is totally original, as I've said, and it almost seems a shame to mess around with it. Also, it's got so many other positives going for it. I feel that this car will sell on the basis that it's a genuine original car. Someone who's going to use the car is going to buy it. Now, those arches aren't pressing. They're not something that needs to be done ASAP. So I think in the interest of saving time and also keeping overheads low, I may well leave those arches as they are. I'm not saying that's 100% the case, just at the moment that's where my thought process is. That's probably the worst bit about this car, if I'm honest. Everything else is absolutely incredible. Now, I've driven this car a fair bit already. I can't say I've done hundreds and hundreds of miles in it, but it's one of those things, as soon as I bought it, I wanted to jump in it, I had to drive it. It's a car that I've wanted to get my hands on for so long, I just couldn't wait to get behind the wheel. And it didn't disappoint. It drives phenomenally well. So I'm going to cut now to some driving sequences on this car, talk you through the experience and show you how it performs, and then we're going to come back here and I'm going to show you the interior of the car. So you're joining me out on the road in this fantastic C43 AMG. Now, in case you didn't know, the C43 AMG in this shape is known as the W202 generation car. What's unusual about this particular car is it's an estate version, as you've seen. Now, the estate C43 AMG is a very, very rare beast. I'm led to believe that there are less than 100 of these cars in right-hand drive guise. The C43 AMG was pretty rare in itself, even in a saloon variant, but as an estate, it's really something quite special. As the name would suggest, the C43 has a 4.3 litre V8 engine and it's producing a little bit more than 300 horsepower. Now, by today's standards, you could argue 300 horsepower doesn't really seem like that much, but let me tell you, on a 24-year-old car, and believe it or not, that's what this is, 24 years old, it really feels like a handful. Rear-wheel drive and absolutely shed loads of torque. It is more than a handful, I can tell you. So driving this C43 really reminds me why I'm in the car trade and why I love this business. This is a car that I've wanted to get my hands on for a long time, and being a car trader, you are in a very privileged position where you are able to buy the cars that you want to have and own and just have them for a short period, and then you can check them off your list. And for me, this C43 is certainly one of those cars. I've wanted to get behind the wheel of one of these for a very long time. So when this one became available for sale, I knew I had to have it. What I really liked about this particular car is it's incredibly original, and on top of that, it's got probably the most extensive service history file I've ever seen on any vehicle I've bought. Now, I've bought a few vehicles on this channel, and you've seen me do videos and I've said how great the service file is. That's because I do go for cars with a solid service history, but this particular car, it is something else. I have got probably every receipt for every wiper blade, every headlight bulb, every oil change. I've got every single thing documented. I've even got the original bill of sale. In the year 2000, this car cost more than £40,000. I've got absolutely everything, and that, for me, the provenance of a car is incredibly important. And that's what I really liked about this particular car. Now, I mentioned that this car was purchased in the year 2000, so it's 24 years old. And as such, it has now done a shade over 152,000 miles, which, if you say it quickly, you kind of think, well, 152,000 miles, that's a lot of mileage. Not for a 24-year-old car, it's not, and certainly not for an AMG Mercedes. So it's a known fact that these cars will go on forever. They'll go around the world 3 times if you service them and look after them. Any Mercedes of this era gets my vote because they're so well put together, but the AMG cars especially, like this C43, they are truly on another level. This is a hand-built AMG engineered engine. It is honestly something else. So this car, I have absolutely no worries it's done 152,000 miles. As I mentioned, I've got all the service history to back up how it's been looked after. And on top of that, it is, of course, a phenomenal world-beating engine. So, unlike some of the cars you see me buy on this channel, this one doesn't actually need a lot of work. It's an incredibly original car, and it doesn't actually want for anything. So what's the plan with it? Well, I'm hoping that this one might be a little bit of an easier ride than some of the cars I've done recently, in as much as it's very well serviced, but I'm going to go through the car completely, check there's nothing it does require. I'm pretty sure it doesn't from what I've seen so far, but I'll be absolutely sure about that. Go around the exterior, the interior of the car, make sure everything's complete. Again, nothing is broken or missing that I'm aware of. There's no damage to the outside of the car. It's a really, really nice, genuine thing. The only possible area that I can pick fault with at the moment are, quite classically for a W202 car, those wheel arches. Now, they are famous for rusting, as a lot of Mercedes this era are, unfortunately. It seems to be their Achilles heel. Fantastic cars in pretty much every way, but they do rust a little bit. This one appears to be very, very rust free, thankfully, apart from 3, ironically just 3 of the 4 arches are showing a very, very small amount of bubbling rust. Now, I'm faced with a dilemma at this point. I could, of course, go down the route of getting the arches repaired, I don't think they need replacing, in as much as the rust isn't bad enough to warrant cutting them out and getting replacement bits put in. It's more or less at a very early stage where a bit of treatment and a blending of the arch could potentially sort the issue out. But the issue I have is, this is such an original, untouched car. If I start doing that and getting the arches blended, it's no longer original, and there is a chance that it could look like it's been falsified. So I think what I'm going to do is actually sell this car as is. Obviously I mentioned I'm going to go through it and make sure it doesn't need anything mechanically or service wise, but in terms of the way it sits and that tiny amount of bubbling rust on the arches, I think I'm going to actually sell the car as it is, with that completely declared in the advert and shown in pictures, because I don't think it's that bad. It's certainly not bad enough to put off any serious buyers who are looking for a genuine, unmolested, proper example of a C43 such as this. Now, the decision not to do those arches may seem a little bit odd if you're watching this and you've seen some of my other videos where I go to the absolute nth degree on a car. As I say, it all comes down to the originality, but also I think this car is going to be such a rarity when it hits the market that anyone who's after a proper one, anyone who's been looking for a good one for a long time, they're not going to be put off by something like that. And for me to go and spend £1,000+ getting all the arches sorted out is not going to add that much value to the sale price of the car. And at the end of the day, this is a business, and I'm thinking fully about profit. How do we maximize profit? How do we make the car saleable easily and quickly? So for me, not to have this car in the body shop for a number of weeks and then all the costs incurred with that, it kind of makes sense on lots of fronts. So it may potentially seem like a shortcut to you guys watching this, but I assure you it's not. It's a calculated decision. Now, of course, if I advertise the car and I get a really strong buyer who knows exactly what they're after, they're the right person for the car, they come and see it, they love it, and if they decided that that was a real showstopper for them, of course there is some negotiation that we can either sort that out for them, or I can go towards working on the price to help them get that done down the line. But I think anyone who's a realistic person looking at this car, given the age and mileage, won't potentially bother with it anyway. They'll probably run it on for a little longer and just enjoy the car. So in terms of what I paid for this car, if you are familiar with this series, Chop to the Top, and you've watched a lot of my stuff, you will of course be aware that I don't give away the figures that I pay for a car until the beginning of the following episode when this is sold. The reason for that is the channel, thankfully, is at such a size now. If I give you a full breakdown of costs of what I paid for this thing and every penny I've spent on it, when it hits the market, I've got an even steeper hill to climb, in that a lot of potential buyers will have seen the car, they'll have seen this video, they'll know exactly what it owes me. And in many cases, potential buyers don't want to give the sort of profits that dealers have in cars, which is a shame, because obviously there's a lot of work and a lot of hidden expense that goes into these things, but we have to make profit. And so by not declaring exactly what I've spent on this thing, I can ask what I believe is proper money for it when it hits the market. Obviously I'll negotiate the price when I sell it. I'm always up for negotiation, but it's just easier that way. So basically I can't tell you what I paid for this right now, but I will, of course, give you a full breakdown of costs at the beginning of the next episode, as I did at the beginning of this episode when I reminded you of what my total budget was moving into this. So, back to the driving experience of this C43. There is a saying, never meet your heroes, and as I said earlier, I have wanted to get behind the wheel of one of these C43s for a very long time, so I suppose there was a part of me that thought, if I do drive this car, there is a chance I may not like it. Well, I can confidently say that never meet your heroes in this case is wrong. This car has been everything I wanted it to be and more. I'm so impressed with it. It's not the most powerful car in the world, just over 300 horsepower, but it's so torquey, and being a car from the early 2000s, it is a lightweight car by today's standards. So the power and the torque and just the way it handles itself is so impressive. Now, of course, this does have traction control and I've got it turned on, but I have noticed if I've pulled out of a junction a little bit eager, let's say, it will happily try and ruin the rear tyres for you. So you have to be very careful with that. But generally, yeah, the driving experience is absolutely incredible. I'm blown away by it. Now, on top of the driving experience, this doesn't relate just to the AMG cars. This is just to do with old Mercedes in general, but just being in a Mercedes of this era, it's just such a pleasing place to be. Everything is so well put together. It just reminds you of why Mercedes was, and to a lot of extent still is, one of the greatest car marques in the world, and is so sought after. I don't think I'm going to struggle to sell this car at all. I just think if I can get someone to come and stand in front of it and then drive it, someone who really knows what they're after, someone who wants a C43 and understands what this animal truly is, I think this will sell to the first person who bothers to come and see it. It's just such a tight, nice, well-built, extremely well-performing, beautiful vehicle. It's got absolutely everything. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit smitten with this car. I would like to say, oh, I'll keep it for myself. I say that about every fun car I have. I'm not going to be unrealistic. I know this has got to go. This is chopped to the top. We've got to keep the budget rising. So it's definitely going to sell. And I will settle with the fact that I've had some hands-on experience with a C43 and I've checked it off my list, because it's just, for me, it's one of those bucket list cars. So of course this is how the AMG has arrived to me. It's still awaiting prep. It's not as clean and as proper as I want it to be. So let's head back to the workshop now, and I will crack on with getting this C43 AMG looking as good as it drives. Something else I absolutely love about this car is the sound of it. If you hear it from the inside, you know you're in something a little bit special, but it's by no means raucous. You could do 1,000 miles in this car and you wouldn't get fed up with the noise it makes. And I think the same can be said from the outside of it. It doesn't sound at all yobbish, but it just gives off that kind of iron fist in a velvet glove vibe, that kind of burble, that proper muscly V8 noise, which is gently restrained at the same time. For me, this car ticks a lot of boxes, and I do think whoever buys it will be in the same boat as me, and it will be a bit of an achievement for them. So here's a typical example of how the C43 AMG is a bit of a brute. I'm at quite a quiet road junction here. I'm in a little village. I'm trying to pull out sensibly. I've got to pull out on quite a steep lock because of the way the junction is. Now, obviously this is an automatic, so you can try and be careful with the power, but even doing that, you can hear it just wants to let itself go. And if you're not careful, you're going to spin those tires on every junction, and it's not going to be fun for your wallet. So I think this is one of those cars that's going to take a little bit of getting used to for someone who's jumping in it for the first time. You need to learn how to sort of shackle that power a little bit and just know exactly how gently to feed it in, because if you don't, it's today's a relatively dry day. It's just started spitting, but I can imagine on a really greasy road on a very wet day it would be really quite challenging to keep this thing on the blacktop. Okay, so as I said in that video, absolutely phenomenal to drive. This car is so impressive. It wasn't a case of never meet your heroes. I was absolutely bowled over by this thing. So let's show you the inside. This is, again, a real nice place to be here. The two-tone leather. Now, I know not all C43s had two-tone, but for me, I think this is, you know, it's gorgeous. You had to have the two-tone leather. This car is beautiful inside. Now, also, I'm a real fan of Mercedes of this era. Everything is so well put together. All the switch gear, the dials, everything is just so nicely made. It's just a lovely place to be. Even this headliner, it's this fabric suspended headliner. It's just so typically 90s Mercedes, and I absolutely love it. In the back, typically with cars like this, the rear seats haven't been used all that much by the look of it. It's still a very practical, usable vehicle. Now, obviously everything looks a little bit funny because the headrests are all in different adjustment positions. It's just the way I've got it and how I've been driving it. These are all electronically adjustable, as you can imagine, and they'll all get sorted out as I clean the interior. But my point of showing you this is there's really nothing to do in here. I mean, I would say, oh, just give it a clean, but it doesn't even need that much of a clean. It will, of course, get an interior valet, but it doesn't really need too much. It's absolutely gorgeous in here. Now, what makes this C43 a little bit unique is, of course, the load area. Look at this. It is a cavernous space for a performance vehicle. And what's more, we've got a dog guard built in. We've got a load cover built in. It's just such a usable, lovely thing. And another nice touch, we've got the medical kit from Mercedes, all complete, unopened. I'll try and show you this one-handed. It's a little bit tricky. but everything in here, original factory stuff, all unopened, all absolutely perfect. The same with this spare, everything is where it should be. An absolute gem of a car. So I said these were rare. Now I've been doing some research on the numbers and I'm still trying to get a proper grip on it, but so far what I'm learning is in right-hand drive UK spec, these cars were pretty hard to come by even in the day. From what I've read online, in terms of a UK right-hand drive estate C43, there were less than 80 of these things produced. So here is one of 80. Now we don't know how many of those have been written off, how many have been broken for parts, etc. So this is a very rare bird. So as I explained in that driving piece, I won't be giving details on what I've paid for this car until it has been sold, and that'll be at the beginning of the next episode. I gave you the reasons on the drive. Basically, I don't want to let the whole internet know exactly what this thing owes me, because then selling it becomes that much more challenging. All I will say is I paid, I think, a respectable price for this car. It warranted a respectable price, so I didn't steal it or anything like that. It was a fair price to pay for a fair car, but I do think there's enough in it for me to make a profit. And what's more, it's one of those cars that I'm going to get such a kick out of just dealing with and having hands-on experience with, that even if it wasn't the biggest profit I've ever made, as long as it makes some profit, I'll sleep happy. You know, this thing is such a thing to be around. I probably seem a little bit excitable about it, more so than some of the cars I've done, because this for me is a real bucket list car and something I've wanted to get my hands on for a very long time, and here it is, in an estate no less. So I am very pleased to have it here. In terms of the work that he's doing, as I've said, there's not really a lot outstanding here. There's that little bit of paint on the rear bumper there. You could argue if I wanted to go to town I could do those arches. At the moment the plan is not to do those. It's a genuine original car and it's going to be sold as such. I've looked at the MOT history of this one. Now in the last MOT there was some advisories on brake lines being covered in grease or other substances. Now that could just be stone chip. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem with the brake lines, but I do need to have a look at them. There was also an advisory to do with corroded sills. Now of course, with this body kit, you can't tell from this angle what's going on. I don't actually know what condition the sills are in. So what I need to do now is get it on the ramp and have a look underneath and see how bad things are. If it's a case of, is there any welding needed, or is it just a case of clean it up, put a bit of treatment on there, protect it, move forward. Once I've established what needs doing and done those jobs, it will be going in for a fresh MOT, because at the moment I think it's probably only got 1 or 2 or 3 months MOT left. I would put a fresh MOT on anything I sell anyway, but this one clearly needs it because it's a short-term MOT left. So I don't think I've got that much work to do, fingers crossed, touching wood with everything I've got. It's a genuine car, and I think a genuine car with the amount of history that this thing has got will stand out on its own in the marketplace, and that's kind of what I'm hoping is going to happen with this one. I'm not going to ask absolute top dollar when I sell this, because it's not a concours example. It's a very nice, genuine, original example with reams of history, yes, but it's not the best one that anyone's ever seen. So I think the plan with this one will be to go in a little bit above mid-market for it. If you look closely online at what these have fetched and what people are currently asking, some are very cheap because they are completely knackered. Others are very expensive because people are trying to capitalize on the rarity aspect of them, I think. But even so, there's not a huge amount out there, so it's quite a small pool. Now that could be good news on one hand. Good news that if someone is specifically looking for a C43 AMG, specifically in a state, there is not going to be many to choose from, so I'm probably going to get the phone ringing that way. But the downside of that, being a rare car like this, certainly a performance car like this, people who actually want a 24-year-old performance estate, how many people are there out there like that? I mean, someone like me, yes, I'd love it. I would love to be in the market to buy one of these for myself. But I'll admit I am probably a little bit unusual. So I don't think there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of people calling me on it. I just think I need to find 2 or 3 people who know what they're looking at, they know what a good one is, they know what a genuine car is, and they are ready to roll. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen. It might fly out the door within 2 or 3 days of advertising. It might stick for 2 months. We just don't know at this stage. Anyway, I'm not going to say too much more about it. Let's get out of this rain. I'm going to put this on the ramp and we're going to have a look underneath and see what the situation is with those sills and with those brake lines. Only advisories I've seen. I'll give it a general look around other than that, and then I'll be taking it in for its MOT. Okay, so the Merc is up on the ramp, and I've got to say, on first inspection, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I don't want to sound surprised, but with old cars, you never know what you're going to get. So, especially an old Merc, you know, you get up on the ramp, you could see some horror stories, but really on first inspection, everything looks okay. I think any work that's ever needed to be done on this car has been done. I can't see any immediate oil leaks, coolant leaks, anything hideous like that. The brake lines, etc., everything that I can see, all the lines look good. I can't see the cause for an advisory. There's no excessive stone chip on anything, so I don't know what that's all about. Worst things I've found are sort of at the rear of the body here. There's some light surface corrosion going on around here, but it's nothing penetrative. This side has had some attention, obviously, so not too bad. I think I'll buzz a lot of that back because some of the chip they put on is flaking. So plan is to buzz anything loose like that back, put some proper treatment on it, let that soak in, and then probably use Gravitex or something similar to protect the car. Around here I found, just here on the body, it looks like there's been some kind of, I don't know if that's welding or what's been going on, but there's nothing rotted through. The worst stuff I'm seeing is surface corrosion just here. I've had a poke around, I can't get it to go through anywhere, so that's really good news. Just wants a really good cleanup and protecting for future. This side, I think this is where the advisory for the sill comes from. You can see that slight bit of corrosion there. So what I think I'll do is take the fixings out of that body kit, that side skirt, pull that out the way, brush everything back as best I can, just get all the surface rubbish off there, get it treated, and I think Bob's your uncle there. So I'm very, very pleased with the underside of the car. As usual, I'm going to start with the oily bits, so I'm going to do all the underside bits and pieces first before dropping this thing down, and then giving topside a really good clean and detail. And although it's got a massive history file, I should say, I'm going to go through that with a fine-tooth comb and see when the last interval service was and make sure it's not wanting for that, because if it does want a service, I may as well do it while it's here. I really don't want to sell it to someone and then they have to immediately get a service. So not saying it does need one, I need to read all the paperwork, and as I've said, there's masses of it, but I'll have a skim through there, and if it needs any of that sort of service work doing, we'll get that done before it leaves me. But really, at the moment, I just want to keep the MOT tester happy, and looking at the previous notes, the two things that were picked up on, one, yes, I can see you can sort that out. The lines all look absolutely perfect. I'm not going to scrape away at these with a wire brush or anything and try and make them better than they are. They're totally genuine, they look original, and they look sound. So really good news underneath. Let's crack on and do the bits and pieces that are required. Okay, so you're joining me after sorting out those little bits of minor corrosion. Main thing was obviously this offside sill. It was just surface rust, nothing penetrative, but it obviously didn't look great. So what I've done is buzzed everything back with a wire brush, given it all some proper treatment using Hydrate 80, and then it's got Gravitex over the top. So it's all nice and uniform, nothing that should upset the MOT tester. You'll notice I haven't done the entire underside of the car. I didn't want to make it look all fake under here, so I've really done the bits that needed to be done and nothing more. A couple of little bits around here I've just freshened up just to make sure there's no surface rust that could come to anything more than what it already is. The other thing on a previous advisory, which was mentioned, was these brake lines. As I said just now, I can't see anything wrong with them, so I've left them alone. I really can't see what the complaint is there. And I'm not going to start buzzing around a brass brush or anything on them now, just to try and make them look better than they are. I think they're absolutely fine. So I do have an MOT test booked for this car today. The way I generally do it is I'll put it in for an MOT, checking things as best I can, making sure everything looks and feels all right, but I'll put it in thinking that if it does fail on anything or get advised on anything serious, those are things I can sort out before selling it. So that's the tactic with this one. I've done the bits that were advised previously. I can't see anything else that should fail the car or upset the MOT tester, but we don't know until we put it in. So that's happening today. Once I get it back, I'll have a better idea. Of course, I'll update you when I get the car back and we'll go from there. So while I'm waiting for that to happen, I could get on with detailing the car, but of course it's so miserable outside at the moment, typical England. If I make it all nice and shiny and clean, as soon as I drive it to the MOT station, it's going to get knackered again. So I'm loath to do that. Of course, the same goes for the paintwork that needs to be done on that rear bumper. I could get on and do the paintwork, but it'll still be fresh going to the MOT station, and that just won't do. It'll affect it too badly. So at the moment, I think I'm going to have to just wait until this MOT test is done and go from there. So I will catch you in a minute when the MOT test is done. Okay, we are back from MOT and I am very pleased to say that the Mercedes passed, and it passed with just 2 advisories. One advisory was on this near side front tyre. Apparently the inside edge is just starting to wear. It's definitely not low, looking at the tread, it's not low at all, but apparently the inside edge looks like it's wearing slightly faster than the rest of the tyre. It's really, I think that's quite a picky advisory, but it's fair enough, that's what it's got. The other advisory, whereas the tester agreed that the brake lines that we saw underneath were absolutely fine, no reason to advise those, the brake ferrules on the front corners, basically, they are slightly corroded, so surface corrosion, not penetrative rust or anything horrible. So all that needs is a bit of brushing back and a little bit of treatment and they'll be good as gold. So I will of course deal with that before this car goes on. But to say that this 24-year-old, 152,000 mile car has just passed an MOT with just those 2 advisories, I'm very, very pleased. Now, the car is dry, so I'm going to get on and deal with the paintwork that's needed. I did say before, it's the corner of this rear bumper. It's still dirty at the moment, so I'm going to clean it up in a minute, and then I'll be able to show you just how dull and lackluster this previous repair is. From this angle, you can actually see a little bit more of that flaking paint I mentioned before. So that is the job for now. Clean this up, and then deal with the, I'm going to call it a smart repair, but it's kind of a blend-in repair on this rear bumper. So that's the next thing you're going to see me do. Okay, so now that I've cleaned that area up, I can show you a little bit better what I meant about this corner of the bumper being a bit dull and lackluster. If you look at this part of the bumper, you can clearly see there's a sheen to it, factory finish, whatever. Come around to this corner here, you quickly notice that that sheen disappears. So my assumption is there's been a small blunder on this bumper here, just a little rub, pretty standard stuff. The repair that's been done has either failed or just not aged well. I don't think the prep was all that great based on the amount of flaking and cracking and things I'm seeing, but something else interesting I've noticed, which I want to show you now just for the interest of this video, you may be able to see a bit of a step here. It looks to me as if whoever did this repair, there was some flaking paint or whatever, and they've just literally probably Stanley'd a line in it and just they've hard lined up to that point, which is not, in my opinion, the way to go. So that will get sorted. Clearly the dullness gets sorted, all this flaking, bad prep area gets sorted. Now while I've been cleaning, some of the paint that hasn't adhered probably has flaked away. It's not a problem at this stage because I can sort it all. It's just kind of interesting to show it. From this angle, you might be able to see, silver is a very, very hard colour to match, as you probably know, but you can probably see from this angle, there's a bit of a tonal blend from about here to somewhere around here into the factory colour. Now, I think the paint match is actually pretty good. As I said, silver is notoriously difficult to match, and you wouldn't have picked up on the colour difference. It's just more that the paint was so flat. There's also, from this parking sensor onwards, some cracking, so I might as well deal with all of that at the same time. Really just wanted to highlight some of the issues with the repair on this bumper and things that I'm going to be looking to improve before I crack on and do it with absolutely no sort of backstory. So I won't say too much more. I just want to get on and get this repair done. A lot of it will be done in time lapse. If there's anything relevant along the way, I will of course explain it as I go, but I think if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll be aware of the sort of thing I do, so you'll be kind of up to speed on what it is I do with regards to these little repairs. But as I say, less talking, more action. Right, so we're a little bit further down the line. I was prepping the bumper. Basically, bodywork is a bit like archaeology sometimes, and what I think has happened, rather than just a rub on this corner, there was a bit of a split in the bumper once upon a time here, because I found a repair there which flowed into this return section above the exhaust. The repair was good, the repair was solid, the bumper wasn't going to move, it was just the top of the the repair itself, if you think of the skim before the paint, that had cracked, and that has obviously caused a lot of issues. The paint and finish wasn't great, granted, I said that before, but those little issues I picked up on before I started the job, that was all to do with this repair. So everything's been keyed up, etc., and now all the little bits and pieces that have to be made better are in skim filler, which is basically a very, very lightweight, some people call it a stopper. It's a very fine filler. It's not really doing any work other than filling in super, super lightweight scratches and marks and imperfections. So I'm waiting for that to go off with the infrared at the moment. Once it has gone off, that will be flatted back, everything's going to be masked up, and then we'll be looking at doing the paint blend. So I'll catch you on that one. So you'll notice that a few bits of this are in high build primer. Normally with an airbrush repair like this, I wouldn't bother with primer, but obviously where there's been previous repairs on this bumper, and I've had to do a little bit of filling today, I just wanted that extra level of build from this primer just to help me make things look as good as they can be. Now I did try and time lapse that, but for some reason it's all gone blurry, so I won't bore you by showing you too much of that. But basically at this stage we've got a little bit of high build in the odd place where it needs to be. That's going to get finely flatted in a moment, and then we're going to go on to base colour, again using the airbrush. Right, whilst I've got the paint drying on that bumper, I'm going to get on with the advisories. Now, as I said, fortunately this car only had 2 advisories, one of which was brake line corrosion. That wasn't the lines, it was the unions. You can see the unions here on the brake line. They're not really corroded, they've just got a tiny bit of surface rust and some sort of road dirt over them. So the plan is to just gently wire brush those up, put a bit of treatment on anything that needs it, and make them look a little bit better, just because it's an advisory and I want to say I've dealt with it, and also it should prevent that coming to anything more than it currently is. The other thing I wanted to mention was the tyre. Now, the other advisory I had was on the near side front tyre, and I know some of you will be wondering, am I going to change the tyre? Well, I'm not, and here's the reason. This is the tyre. You can see, if you just look here, how good the tread is on this. It was the inside edge that was advised as slightly wearing quicker than the rest of the tyre. Now, I guess I can see it if you look at the outside edge. That is slightly better in health than the inside edge, but this is certainly not in bad nick at all. So I really don't think I need to worry too much about that. If when someone comes to see the car and they want to ask about the advisories, they're more than welcome to have a look at this and have a measure at any point on the tyre. But at the moment the car has got a full matching set of Pirellis on it, and while they're in as good a nick as this, I'm really not in a rush to change them. So advisory wise, that one's going to get left alone, but the slight corrosion on those brake unions, they will be getting sorted shortly. Right, really easy job. That's those brake unions sorted out. Now, it looks a little bit wet. The reason for that is it's had rust converter put on it, some Hydrate 80. So I'll let that do its thing and work into the metal probably over the next day or so. When that's had enough time to really do its magic, then I'm probably going to put a little bit of Hammerite over the union. Not to make it look fake or false or anything like that. It's just, I think it's just another layer of protection. And hopefully that means the next time this car goes for MOT in a year's time, they won't get advised again. But I'm absolutely happy they don't need replacing. It's just sort of keeping things at bay. So one side done, now I'm on to the next. So that is that little bumper repair done. I'm pretty happy with it. As I mentioned, silver is notoriously hard to blend, so I'm never 100% pleased with the repairs I do in silver, but this one is pretty good. And what's more important is you can just see, I'm trying to catch it in the light, there is now a proper nice sheen on that bumper, whereas before it was completely flat and it just looked terrible. You'll notice that the car is still quite dirty, so the next job I've got to do is take it outside and give it a bit of a clean off before I can give it its final sort of going over and sale prep detail, if you will. I've just got to get rid of all the dirt and muck from where I've been driving the car. And obviously now I've done that rear bumper, there's a bit of sort of wet sanding tilth, if you like, on the tailpipes, things like that. Just give the car a general clean, so I'm going to knock on with that now. Okay guys, so that is it. This beautiful C43 is now ready to leave me. As I mentioned in the intro to this video, this was not going to be as in-depth as some of the cars you've seen me work on. In the trade, we sometimes refer to cars like this as a clean up and sell job. Now, this was obviously a little bit more in depth in cleaning with that little bit of paint work I've had to do, but essentially the car was all there. It was a very genuine original car, and my plan was always going to be to sell it as such. Naturally, I wanted to put a fresh MOT on it just to make sure there was nothing awry. Probably just as well I did, because that little bit of corrosion underneath, whereas it wasn't that bad at all, it did want dealing with now, so it didn't become anything in the future. So essentially, yeah, not a huge amount of work to do on this one, but I'm very, very pleased with how it's come out, and I do honestly think it's going to make someone very happy. I think someone's going to really have to have this if they can be bothered to come and see it. If they know about these cars, this is going to be the one for them. So I mentioned that little repair I had to do on the back bumper of this car. Not a huge deal, just a little bit of a repair, but it was very flat and lackluster before. I'm very pleased with how the bumper's turned out now, and it is, of course, nice and glossy and looking as proper as the rest of the car does. Inside, exactly the same story, nothing much to do, just a bit of a clean up. It was already in lovely condition, but I just wanted to give it a bit of a freshen up and make sure everything was as good as can be. So that really went as far as giving the carpets a very good clean, giving the leather a bit of treatment, and giving the dash a bit of a shine up. That was really it. It was an easy ride. Now, I was very lucky that this car went through its MOT as easily as it did, but then I wasn't all that surprised. Being a Mercedes of this era, aside from a few corrosion issues, there's not really too much to look for. They are very, very solid, well-built cars. So something else I mentioned about this car early in the video was the huge amount of service history that came with it. Now, when I bought the car, the service history was basically put in a bag. It was all in little plastic wallets, so I imagine it's been in a folder at some point in its life, but I got it in a bag. So what I've done is get a new ring binder and put it all in chronological order, and it really does date everything that's been done to this car properly, and that goes right back to the original bill of sale. And as I said earlier, this was over £40,000 in the year 2000. So starting from that point and working on, every single little bit that's been done to this car has been recorded, and it's now put in a lovely ring binder, all in order, ready to go with this car. And I think that's the sort of thing that's going to be important to someone who's going to buy a car like this, the history of it, and being able to show what's been done at every stage in a neat and proper order. Something else I mentioned earlier was that I can't really be sure how quickly this one will sell. Now, ultimately that will come down to price, of course it will, but it is quite a specialist car at the same time. I mentioned I'm going to go in for something above mid-market for this car, and it's a very tricky one because there's not many other similar cars to look at and sort of figure out where the price needs to be for it. So I can't say exactly what I'm going to launch this car at. I'm going to probably take a bit of a punt on it, to be honest, and worst case scenario, if it really sticks and it doesn't sell, then I can only revise my price. So I'd love to tell you exactly what I'm going to advertise this car for, where I'm going to advertise it, etc., but at the moment I really don't know. In terms of where, I mean, I guess I'm going to put it on all the classic car portals, etc. Maybe some of the forums, people who are after this car, because as I mentioned several times, it's a very, very specialist car, and I think it will appeal to someone who knows what it is already. I don't want to have to sell the dream of a C43 estate to someone who doesn't know what it is and probably doesn't care. So yeah, specialist locations is where I'm going to advertise it, but in terms of money, at the moment, who knows? However, I will, of course, update you on the prices, both in terms of what I advertise it for and what I ultimately sell it for at the beginning of the next episode. So guys, as always, thank you ever so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it and you're not already subscribed, why not consider doing so? Make sure you hit the bell notification and you'll be notified as soon as more videos go live. In the meantime, thanks once again for watching, and I will, of course, catch you on the next one. Cheers.